To defeat the Axis powers, the Soviet Union had to build the largest armored force in human history. It was a war of numbers, industrial endurance, and rapid technological evolution. From tiny tankettes that were obsolete before the first shot was fired, to massive land battleships that paved the way for modern main battle tanks. This is every single Soviet vehicle used in World War II. Light tanks and tankettes. T-27, a tiny tankette based on the British Carden-Loyd Mark VI. Armed only with a single DT machine gun, it lacked a rotating turret, and its armor was so thin it could be penetrated by rifle fire at close range. While useful in the 1930s for fighting insurgents in Central Asia, it was completely obsolete by 1941. In the desperate defense of Moscow, some were used to tow 45mm anti-tank guns, but most were abandoned or destroyed. T-37A, the world's first mass-produced amphibious tank. Soviet engineers at the time were obsessed with crossing Europe's many rivers, so this tank featured balsa wood floats and a rear propeller. However, to stay buoyant, the armor was reduced to just 9mm. In combat, it was a death trap, but it provided the Red Army with unique reconnaissance capabilities in the swampy terrain of the Pripyat marshes. T-38, an improved version of the T-37, designed to be lower and wider for better stability in the water. Despite these improvements, it still suffered from the same fatal flaw. It could not fight other tanks. By 1941, thousands of these were deployed, but they were decimated by the German invasion. Most surviving units were stripped of their guns and used as tractors. T-40, the pinnacle of the amphibious light tanks. Unlike its predecessors, the T-40 had a boat-shaped hull that offered genuine seaworthiness and mounted a heavy 14.5mm machine gun capable of damaging German half-tracks. It was an excellent scout vehicle, but when the invasion began, the Kremlin ordered factories to stop producing complex amphibious vehicles and focused strictly on fighting tanks. T-26, the infantry's workhorse at the start of the war. Based on the British Vickers 6-ton, the Soviets purchased the license and built over 10,000 of them, more than the entire tank fleet of Germany. It proved effective during the Spanish Civil War, but by 1941, its 15mm of vertical armor was useless against modern anti-tank guns. It represents the tragedy of the early war, a tank that was good enough for the 30s, but helpless in the 40s. BT-2, the first of the famous fast tanks. It used a revolutionary suspension system designed by American engineer J. Walter Christie. This allowed the crew to remove the heavy steel tracks in 30 minutes and drive the tank on its rubber road wheels like a race car, reaching speeds of over 70 kilometers per hour. It was designed for a war of rapid offense, a doctrine the Soviets could not use in 1941. BT-5, an upgrade to the BT-2, featuring a larger turret and a 45mm gun, the standard Soviet tank gun of the pre-war era. While it retained the incredible speed of the series, it still used a petrol engine, which had a dangerous tendency to catch fire violently when hit, earning these tanks the grim nickname "burning coffins" among their crews. BT-7, the definitive fast tank and the direct ancestor of the T-34. It refined the hull shape and improved the engine reliability. In the border conflicts against Japan in 1939, the BT-7 proved that speed could be a weapon, flanking Japanese positions before they could react. However, against the German Wehrmacht, its light armor was a liability, leading to heavy losses during Operation Barbarossa. T-60, a desperate stopgap tank. When the main tank factories were being evacuated to the Urals in 1941, the Red Army needed armor immediately. The T-60 was designed in just 2 weeks to be built in car factories using truck engines and 20mm aircraft cannons. It was small and weak, but it was the only tank available during the defense of Moscow, keeping the infantry in the fight. T-70, the replacement for the T-60, arriving in 1942. It featured thicker, sloped armor that could withstand small-caliber anti-tank fire and mounted a 45mm gun. While it was the second most produced tank of the war, it became obsolete by 1943 as it could not penetrate the new German Tiger or Panther tanks. T-50, a highly advanced light tank intended to replace the T-26. It featured excellent sloped armor similar to the T-34 and a diesel engine. However, its complex design made it nearly as expensive to build as a medium tank. With the Soviet economy in crisis mode, the project was canceled in favor of cheaper, mass-producible vehicles. Medium tanks. T-28. A multi-turreted medium tank from the 1930s, inspired by the British Vickers A1E1 Independent. It had 3 turrets, one for the main 76mm gun and 2 for machine guns. While it was a breakthrough in 1933, by the war's start it was a lingering relic. Its large size made it an easy target, and most were lost due to mechanical breakdowns rather than enemy fire. T-34-76, the legend. When it appeared in 1941, it rendered all German anti-tank weapons obsolete. Its 60-degree sloped armor caused shells to bounce off, its wide tracks conquered the Russian mud, and its V2 diesel engine gave it immense range. It forced the Germans to completely redesign their own panzer forces. Despite poor crew ergonomics and a lack of radios, its strategic impact was unmatched. T-34-57, a rare tank destroyer variant of the T-34. In 1941, engineers fitted a small number of tanks with the high-velocity ZIS-4 57mm gun. This weapon had incredible penetration power, capable of punching through German armor at extreme ranges, but the shells were expensive to manufacture, and the project was shelved until the Battle of Kursk. T-34-85, the late-war upgrade that secured victory. By 1944, the standard T-34 could no longer fight German Tigers head-on. The solution was a new, larger turret housing an 85mm gun derived from an anti-aircraft weapon. This upgrade allowed Soviet crews to engage German heavy armor from safer distances and was produced in such massive numbers that it overwhelmed the technically superior but numerically inferior German forces. Heavy tanks. T-35. A massive land battleship with 5 independent turrets and a crew of 11 men. It was the pride of Soviet parades in the 1930s, symbolizing industrial might. In reality, it was a disaster. The commander could not coordinate fire from all 5 turrets, and the engine was too weak to move the massive hull. Almost all T-35s were lost to transmission failure before they even saw combat. KV-1, the Kliment Vorlyshov heavy tank. In 1941, this tank was virtually invincible. There are documented accounts of single KV-1s holding up entire German divisions for days, taking hundreds of hits without a single penetration. Its only enemies were the 88mm flak gun and its own unreliable transmission, which often broke under the 45-ton weight. KV-2, the bunker buster. Recognizing the need to destroy Finnish fortifications, engineers mounted a gigantic 152mm howitzer in a box-shaped turret on a KV chassis. It was top-heavy, slow, and could tip over on uneven ground. However, its high-explosive shell was devastating, capable of knocking the turret off a German tank purely through the force of the explosion. KV-1S. The S stood for Skorosnoi, meaning speed. As the war became more mobile, the heavy KV-1 was too slow. This version shaved off armor plating to reduce weight and installed a new gearbox. It was a compromise design, trading invincibility for the ability to keep up with the T-34s during the counteroffensives of 1942. KV-85, a transitional model created in 1943. The Red Army desperately needed 85mm guns to fight the new German Tigers, but the new IS tank wasn't ready. Engineers managed to fit the IS turret onto the KV hull. Only 148 were built, serving as a stopgap until the true Stalin tanks arrived. IS-2, the apex predator of the Eastern Front. Armed with a massive 122mm field gun, it delivered a kinetic punch that could crack the armor of a German Panther tank without even penetrating it. While it had a slow rate of fire, only 2 rounds per minute, its strategic impact was unmatched. IS-3. Arriving just as the war in Europe ended, this tank featured a radical pike nose armor layout and a hemispherical turret that deflected shots from almost any angle. While it saw no combat in World War II, it shocked the Western Allies in the Berlin Victory Parade of 1945, setting the standard for Soviet tank design for the next 40 years. Self-propelled guns. ZIS-30. A desperate improvisation from the dark days of 1941. It consisted of a 57mm anti-tank gun bolted onto a Komsolet's artillery tractor. It was unstable and had almost no armor, but it provided the only mobile long-range anti-tank firepower available during the Battle of Moscow. Su-76. Based on the T-70 chassis, this was the second most produced Soviet armored vehicle of the war. It was open-topped, exposing the crew to shrapnel and the elements, earning it the nickname, the Bitch. However, it was light, reliable, and crucial for infantry support, able to fire over obstacles and destroy machine gun nests. Su-122, a howitzer mounted on a T-34 chassis. It was the first Soviet attempt at a medium assault gun designed to blast apart bunkers. While effective against fortifications, its short-barreled gun struggled against enemy armor, leading to the development of dedicated tank destroyers. Su-85, a dedicated tank destroyer built on the T-34 chassis. By removing the turret, engineers could fit the larger 85mm gun earlier than they could on the tank itself. It served as the primary counter to the German Tigers in 1943 and 44. Su-100, the successor to the Su-85. Its 100mm naval gun was one of the best anti-tank weapons of the entire war, capable of destroying any German vehicle at long range. It remained in service in various armies around the world for decades after the war ended. Su-152. Built on the KV chassis, this beast carried a massive howitzer. It earned the nickname Zviroboy, or Beast Killer. During the Battle of Kursk, it was the only Soviet vehicle capable of reliably destroying the new German Ferdinand and Elephant tank destroyers, literally blowing them apart with high-explosive shells. Isu-152, the improved version built on the IS chassis. It was a multi-role monster. It served as a heavy artillery, a tank destroyer, and a heavy assault gun. In urban combat, especially in Berlin, it was used to level entire buildings where enemy snipers were hiding. Armored cars and aerosans. BA-10, the primary heavy armored car of the early war. Built on a truck chassis, it carried the same 45mm gun as the T-26 tank. While effective on roads, its wheels struggled in the Russian mud, leading the Red Army to favor tracked tanks over armored cars as the war progressed. BA-64, a light scout car built on a gas jeep chassis. It was fast, small, and perfect for reconnaissance. Its high angle of fire also allowed it to engage targets on upper floors during urban combat, making it surprisingly useful in city fights. NKL-26, an armored aerosan.
NKL-26, an armored aerosan, essentially a sled powered by an aircraft engine and propeller. It was a vehicle born of the Russian climate. While tanks froze and trucks stalled in the deep snow, the aerosan skated over the surface at high speed, conducting raids and delivering mail to isolated units in the dead of winter. Trucks and tractors. GAZAA, the Soviet license-built version of the Ford Model AA. It was the backbone of Soviet logistics. During the siege of Leningrad, these trucks were the lifeline of the city, driving across the frozen Lake Ladoga on the road of life to bring food to the starving population. ZIS-5, a simple, rugged 3-ton truck. It was famous for its ability to run on low-quality fuel and start in freezing temperatures. As steel became scarce, later models were built with wooden cabs and removed fenders, stripped down to the bare essentials to keep production numbers high. Stalinets S-60, a heavy tractor originally meant for collective farms. When the war started, thousands were drafted into the army to tow heavy howitzers. With a top speed of only 4 miles per hour, they were agonizingly slow, but their torque allowed them to pull massive guns through mud that would swallow a horse. Katyusha rocket launcher. Mounted on trucks like the ZIS-6 or imported American Studebakers, this weapon fired a terrifying barrage of 132mm rockets. They were inaccurate, but when fired in battalion strength, they saturated entire grid squares with explosives. The distinctive screeching noise they made terrified German troops, who nicknamed it Stalin's organ. From the snows of Moscow to the streets of Berlin, these vehicles carried the Red Army to victory. It was a victory won not just by the brilliance of engineers, but by the sacrifice of the crews who operated these often rough and unfinished machines. Which one do you think was the most important? Let us know in the comments and subscribe to Curiosity Club for more deep dives into military history.